In a kingdom where wealth was more valuable than life itself, one man stood, above all others a man, whose riches defied imagination, and whose power stretched across continents. This was Chief Olumide, a billionaire whose name was known in every corner of the world, whispered in awe and fear. But behind his towering empire of diamonds, oil, and gold lay a curse that would cost him everything, including his own soul. Imagine being born into a life where your every breath could change the world literally. Sounds like a fairy tale, right? Well, for Amara, the only daughter of Chief Olumide, it was her tragic reality. She was born to be a vessel of untold riches, but what no one knew was that her curse was not just a gift, it was a dark chain that bound her to a fate worse than death. Before we dive deeper into this spellbinding tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Chief Olumide wasn't always the ruler of an empire. There was a time when he was just a man with a dream and overwhelming desire to conquer the world. He wanted power, wealth, influence, and the respect that only the richest men could command. But as with many men who reach for the stars, Olumide found that there was a price to pay. His insatiable greed led him to make a fateful decision, a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. On one of his many travels, deep in the heart of an ancient forest, Olumide encountered a mysterious sorcerer. This sorcerer, draped in robes that shimmered like the starry sky, offered him a deal. "I can grant you the riches of the world," the sorcerer promised, "but you must pay a price." The price, however, was not one Olumide fully understood. But driven by his hunger for more, he agreed, sealing his fate with a simple, careless promise. Years passed, and with each passing year, Olumide's wealth grew exponentially. His holdings expanded from one corner of the earth to the other, and the world watched in awe as his empire bloomed. Yet, what he failed to realize was that the riches came at a great cost his own daughter, Amara, would bear. When Amara was born, it seemed like any other royal birth, a joyful occasion that marked the continuation of a legacy. Her mother, Nia, held her in her arms, and the kingdom celebrated the arrival of a princess who was destined for greatness. But Amara's greatness wasn't the kind her father had envisioned. No, her greatness was something far more peculiar. As Amara grew, her parents noticed something strange. Whenever she fell ill, she would vomit not food or sickness, but the very wealth that sustained her father's empire. Gold coins, platinum bars, stacks of bilstes would pour from her small body, and her father would collect them eagerly, more focused on the treasures than his daughter's well-being. It didn't matter that Amara's body grew frailer with every violent episode. The wealth kept coming, and that was all that mattered. Chief Olumide, obsessed with his empire's growth, saw only opportunity. The more Amara vomited, the more his riches expanded. His empire became a legend. Yet, as his power grew, his daughter's life became a hollow existence. Amara's life was reduced to a single function, producing wealth. She was no longer a daughter, but a tool, a machine that churned out riches at an alarming rate. But no one cared about Amara's pain. Not her father, not the servants, and certainly not the world that watched her father's empire flourish. The world saw a billionaire at the peak of his power, not a broken girl locked away in a dark, cold closet. From the time Amara could remember, her life was confined to that small, dark closet. It was hidden away in the deepest part of the mansion, far from the eyes of the world. In the early years, her parents had indulged her with toys, fancy dresses, and all the trappings of royalty. But as she grew older, those things lost their meaning. There was no joy in the gold, no warmth in the jewels. These were things her father hoarded not for her, but for his own selfish desires. Her existence became one of silent suffering. Amara was forced to lie on her bed, trapped in a cycle of illness, vomiting up gold coins and diamonds, as her body weakened. There were no doctors, no comforting hands to ease her pain, just the cold, indifferent walls of her closet. Her father would come to her occasionally, but only to check on the wealth she had produced. He never asked how she felt. He never noticed the tears that filled her eyes, the deep loneliness that consumed her. She was just the means to his insatiable end, a vessel for his desire to conquer the world. But despite the cruelty of her fate, Amara's spirit never fully broke. Deep inside her, a small, defiant spark remained. She knew she was more than this. She knew that somewhere, deep within her, she was more than the riches she produced. One day, something shifted inside her. It wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. As she lay in the cold dark, her body aching and her mind numb from years of torment, Amara felt something stir. It started as a tiny voice, a whisper in her soul that grew louder with each passing second. You are not just this. You are more than this. The curse that had bound her for so long, that had made her nothing more than a tool for her father's greed, began to lose its grip. For the first time in years, Amara didn't feel sick. She didn't feel empty. No longer was she bound to the wealth she created. Something inside her snapped, and in that moment, she knew she could break free. Amara stood, her body shaking, but there was no fear in her heart, only determination. For years, her life had been dictated by her father's greed and the curse of endless wealth. But now she was done. She had seen enough. No longer would she allow herself to be used and discarded. She walked toward the door of the closet, and for the first time in years, the light that flooded the hallway seemed welcoming, not blinding. The air was fresh, and the scent of freedom was intoxicating. Amara didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but she knew it was better than the cold, empty life she had been living. Chief Olumide sat in his grand office, his empire expanding at an unprecedented rate. He was surrounded by the finest luxuries, crystal chandeliers, priceless art, and treasures that were the envy of kings. But as he reviewed documents and made decisions, a strange chill filled the air, one that made the hairs on his neck stand up. Without warning, Amara entered the room. She wasn't the fragile, sickly girl he had locked away. No, this was a woman who radiated strength, a woman who no longer needed the riches that had once flowed from her. "Father," she said, her voice calm, but filled with an unmistakable force. "For years, you've used me as a tool for your insatiable greed. I am not your vessel. I am your daughter, and I will not be your prisoner any longer." Her words struck him like a blow. The shock on his face was evident as he rose from his seat, his empire suddenly feeling smaller, more fragile. "Amara, what are you saying?" His voice trembled. "I did all of this for you, for our future. The wealth, the power, it was for you." Amara shook her head. "No, father, it was never for me. It was for your ambition. You used me, and I refuse to be used any longer." As she spoke, the room seemed to crackle with energy. The spell that had bound her, the spell that had been in place since her birth, began to shatter. The wealth she had created for her father vanished, disintegrating before their eyes. The gold, the jewels, the stacks of cash all turned to dust, falling away like a fading dream. Chief Olumide watched in horror as his empire crumbled before him. His wealth evaporated, his power disintegrating like sand through his fingers. Amara's eyes, once filled with pain, were now filled with something stronger, resolve. She had broken free from the curse that had bound her for so long. Amara walked away from the wreckage of her father's empire. She had nothing. No wealth, no treasures, no legacy. But what she had gained was something far more valuable. Freedom. She left the mansion and the remnants of her father's riches behind her, venturing into a world she had never known, a world of possibility. In a small village, far from the ashes of her father's empire, Amara built a new life. This time, it wasn't about gold. It wasn't about diamonds or cash. It was about love, connection, and community. She worked alongside the people, offering help where she could, and in return, she found something more precious than any wealth her father could have ever given her: a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. Amara's story became one of redemption, not just for her, but for the world she touched. She showed that true riches didn't come from what you had, but from the love and kindness you gave to others. So, what happened to Chief Olumide? His empire collapsed, and with it, the life he had built on greed and manipulation. He was left with nothing but the remnants of his former wealth and the empty realization that he had lost everything that truly mattered. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more incredible tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more.